Oh, freedom, oh, freedom, oh, freedom over me.
I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers.
The Dutch West India Company has a very problematic relationship with the area Native Americans. By 1639, relations had deteriorated into war. At that point, a number of the Creoles are put into the military force against the Indians.
There is a fear among Europeans during this time that African Americans may join with Native Americans. And the First 11, in fact, used this fear to negotiate.
They had been part of the Reformed Church, they had served in the military, they had built the fort, they had done all of the critical labor that was necessary to make New Amsterdam into a viable town. Now, it was their time to be free.
The company responded with what has become known as half-freedom. These men and their wives could live on what became known as the free Negro lots. They could farm their own land, and they paid a kind of tribute in return to the company. The company also had the right to call them up if they needed their labor.
Don't get the idea that these were just nice people and wanted to allow these Africans an opportunity. They calculated they could make more money with half freedom, and therefore they used that system. But even under those conditions, work in the Dutch colonies for a slave was slavery.
The members of this community of half-free people had to be very profoundly struck with the tentative and tenuous nature of their freedom. The evidence of that is their children, who are not half-free, who remain enslaved, and therefore, in a very profound way, speak to the fact that the community itself is vulnerable.
Half-free blacks don't separate themselves from enslaved blacks. In fact, they work at times to try and negotiate freedom for other enslaved people. Over the years, these 11 men and their wives continue to bargain, petition for freedom for their children.
New Amsterdam is now becoming a good-sized town. At least 20% of the people are black. Some of them are slaves, some are half-free, some are free, but wherever you are in that spectrum, you can see the possibilities.
Half-freedom is this moment where a group of slaves has moved to a new status, and there's probably a belief among the people in the slave community that they too can achieve a new status. Not perfect, not full freedom, but something better and more autonomous than what had existed before.
Freedom was also the goal of black and white indentured servants in Chesapeake Tobacco Country. Since the early 1600s, black people had trickled into the area. Most were enslaved, others indentured servants. A few were free. John Punch was a black indentured servant. James Gregory, a Scotsman, and Victor, from the Netherlands, served with him on a small tobacco farm.
In the New World, every European colony needed to provide a profit. In the Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, Maryland, the more tobacco you could plant, the more profits you could reap, the more pleased the investors back in England would be. And there is tremendous pressure for labor.
They hoped to use Native Americans that they found in Virginia as a labor supply. They were disappointed because the Native Americans in Virginia were powerful enough to frustrate the attempts to use them as forced laborers. It was at that point that the British turned to British laborers under the indentured servitude system.
The status of indentured white servants and indentured Africans was very similar. They were both, of course, hired for a period of time, and both could become free. And let's also say that both were treated real bad. To be an indentured servant in this country meant that you literally didn't have any rights.
In this world, there's not much practical difference in terms of the oppression that they face. In some measure, that equality is an equality because these people can't be treated worse.
By 1640, indentured servants were essential to the profits of Virginia tobacco farmers. Their labor made tobacco the colony's most profitable export.
Three men on the same farm, doing the same labor, being harassed and oppressed on a comparable level, to the point that these three men chose to flee their owner.
John Punch, Victor, and James Gregory crossed the Virginia border into southern Maryland.